Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to the final edition of the Superman and Lois Season 3 review series. And today I'm going to be talking about episode 13, the Season 3 finale, What Kills You Only Makes You Stronger, which I have just finished watching. And holy cow, where do I start with this one? All I have to say is this show, and I've said this time and time again, and I'm going to keep on saying this show will go down, for me, in my opinion anyway, as the best DC show ever. This episode was like a movie. You've heard me say this time and time again. Every episode feels like a mini cinematic movie. But this episode, the season 3 finale, took that to a new level, especially the last 10 minutes of the episode. It just felt like a movie. And watching this while I'm talking to you guys, it was like this is exactly what I wanted to see in a Superman movie. At times, which I'll get into as we move along here, at times it was like I was watching a Superman animated movie. You know, think of Superman Doomsday, which is my all-time favorite Superman animated movie. This episode felt like I was watching a DC animated movie, Superman Doomsday. It was just incredible. And this is exactly what I've been wanting to see with Superman since the beginning. And, you know, this show for me, I loved it. This show, I love it. It's brilliant. And wow, I'm just absolutely speechless. I never ever thought they would go that extra mile because, you know, it's a TV show. I understand and respect that. They do have a very big budget compared to other CW DC shows, but this show really sets itself apart from Arrow, Flash, Supergirl, just to name a few. And you look at those shows and say to yourself, what would those shows have been like if they had a bigger budget? What would it be like if those shows had a cinematic budget? Would it have been good? Would it have been like this? We'll never know. But wow, this episode absolutely blew me away. Lots of callbacks from Death of Superman, Superman Doomsday, some references to the DCAU shows. This episode had it all, and it was incredible. And in terms of how it ended, that's how you end a season. That's how you do a cliffhanger. You leave just enough for people like me begging for more and asking the question, what happens next? This to me redefined the term cliffhanger. And the way it ended, it was like seeing a panel from a graphic novel come to life and brought into live action. It was just absolutely amazing. This was really good. And I think out of all of the season finales Superman and Lois have had, the other two were fantastic. I think this one, for me, is probably the best one. We know we're getting a season 4. That's been confirmed. Don't know how they're going to pull it off, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what they come up with next. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Wow. We've got a lot to talk about here, so let's get straight into it. So, as always, I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened, and then after that, we're just going to get straight into talking about episode 13, the season 3 finale. Let's do this. So, as we saw previously in episode 12, we saw the first appearance of Lex Luthor on the show, and we were treated to a series of flashbacks from Lex Luthor getting sentenced for a crime that he didn't commit, to Lex Luthor taking over the prison and gaining control of the warden and all of its inmates. And we saw the first meeting of longtime sidekick Otis, who we all know would go on to become Lex Luthor's right hand man. And then we saw in the present, Lex Luthor has finally been released from prison, and we saw him basically walking out of prison and beginning this long walk to Smallville, where he finally confronted Lois for printing the article that got him sentenced, and he threatened Lois to retire from journalism or else. And we also saw everybody in Smallville is talking about this mysterious hero going around making saves, and Jordan more or less was bragging about it, although not actually publicly saying it was him. And that caused him and Sarah to really butt heads with one another. And we saw at the end Lex and Otis go underground to Bruno Mannheim's old lab, and they find the Bizarro Superman living underground and has more or less become kind of like a cannibal where he's feeding on other creatures. And we saw him seemingly taking out Otis, and that's pretty much how we left episode 12 on kind of a cliffhanger. We weren't entirely sure whether or not Bizarro took out Otis and Lex Luthor, but it did leave a very interesting question. What plans does Lex Luthor have for Bizarro? So, with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about the season 3 finale, episode 13. What kills you only makes you stronger. So, this episode picks up where we left off from the end of episode 12, and we see it's been over a month since Lex Luthor was released from prison and threatened Lois Lane, putting him behind bars for a crime that he didn't commit. With Lex Luthor completely gone off the grid and hasn't been seen since, Sam advises Clark to consider easing his punishment on Jordan for publicly showboating his powers as a hero. We also see Kyle Cushion has discovered Chrissy is pregnant with their child, and we see John Henry Irons has officially asked Kyle's ex, Lana Lang, on a date after returning to Smallville. Kyle informs Lana about Chrissy's pregnancy, and she gives him her blessing, while Kent's family decide to take a vacation in Italy for the summer. We also see Sam offers John Henry a job in Metropolis to develop new technology for the DoD, along with an opportunity for his daughter Natalie to enroll in the Department of Defense's Academy. However, this would require them to relocate to Metropolis. But all these plans are put on hold when Clark detects that Judge Regan was murdered, and Lois immediately figures out that the killing was carried out by Lex Luthor as a message to her. We also see Sam has begun dating a woman named Gretchen, who is introduced to his grandchildren as he takes on a tour of Smallville. But we soon learn that Gretchen is really working for Lex Luthor and incapacitates Sam Lane in order to bring him back to her boss in Metropolis. Clark encourages Jordan to reconcile with Sarah over their recent falling out, and we see that Jordan and Sarah have mended fences but have decided for the time being not to be friends going forward. I think it's really interesting what this episode did, because in season 4, John Henry Irons, Natalie, Lana, and Sarah, and all of the other characters we have seen in the 3 seasons, they're not going to be back for season 4. So I thought the way they kind of wrapped up all of these characters' story arcs was nicely done, because you don't really want to go into season 4 wondering about what happened to these guys. So I thought the way they handled each character individually was a job well done, because when I was watching this episode, it was still very good, but it was kind of head scratching at first, because I sat there watching it thinking to myself, why are we focusing so much on, Lana and Sarah and John Henry, even though I love John Henry, all of these guys, why are we focusing so much on these characters but not on Lois and Clark and Lex? But then the light bulb went in my head, and I thought to myself, because they're not going to be back as regulars for the fourth season, that's why they're doing this. And it makes perfect sense. So I'm okay with that. Did feel a little bit rushed with some of these characters' arcs, but I thought the way they wrapped them up was nicely done. And it kind of leaves the door open for some of these characters to appear in a one off episode as a recurring character. So it works here, and I thought, as I said, they did a really good job with the way they handled all of these story arcs, because some of these story arcs have been going on since season one, and I kind of felt that some of them were dragging on a little bit. So great job by everybody on the show for wrapping up these story arcs the way they did, and kind of gives a clean slate for season four going forward. So we've kind of moved away from all of those characters' arcs, so now we're just going to be focusing more on the core characters going forward. So nicely well done, I would say. We finally see Lex Luthor is hiding underground as he continues to operate out of Bruno Mannheim's lab underneath the streets of Metropolis, and we see that he has held Bizarro captive and under his control. And we go back to a flashback 32 days earlier, where we see that Lex Luthor and his henchman Otis were badly injured. And every time that they killed Bizarro, Bizarro would come back stronger than ever. And Lex Luthor continues to repeat this process, eventually turning Bizarro into an ultimate weapon. And what we got next was a very graphic and very brutal montage of so many different ways Lex Luthor was killing Bizarro. He used Kryptonite X on him, he used a flamethrower, he dunked his head into a bucket of water and drowned him. All these horrific actions on Bizarro just to make him the ultimate weapon, and we kept seeing Bizarro getting more angry. He was growling and roaring, and we even saw Lex at one point screaming at Bizarro, "Do you want me to kill you? Do you want me to kill you? And do you want me to make you so that no one would ever be able to hurt you ever again?" And we see Bizarro very sadly nodded his head, and eventually we saw Bizarro slowly mutate and transform into Doomsday. Holy cow. Now, for those of you who remember, Bizarro appeared back in season 2, and we saw him wearing the containment suit that Doomsday wore in the comic books, and he was underground, punching his way out until he eventually punched his way up to the surface, just like Doomsday did in the comic books. And remember, we all thought that Doomsday was going to appear on the show, and eventually it turned out to be Bizarro. And we all speculated, even myself as well, we all thought that there's no way they're going to bring someone like Doomsday into the show because he's too big. You know, the budget would just be through the roof. But what they did here was turning Bizarro into Doomsday was a fantastic payoff, because they kept teasing us that Bizarro is Doomsday and it turned out not to be. But now they've gone the other way and done exactly what we said they were going to do all along. So it was absolutely amazing. And this is where things really started to get good. And now that Bizarro has officially transformed into Doomsday, Lex Luthor plans to use his monster to eliminate Lois's last line of defense, Superman. Meanwhile, we see the residents of Smallville are taking advantage of the celebration of the meteor shower, and Kyle publicly proposes to Chrissy. Chrissy happily accepts as Lana and John Henry look on, and we see Superman intercepts Lex Luthor when he approaches the Kent farm again, only to be ambushed by Doomsday, who overpowers him before a terrified public. As we see Doomsday and Superman battle one another, this for me was the highlight of the season 3 finale. We saw Superman and Doomsday battle everywhere. They battled underground. They even fought in the subway, which was clearly an awesome callback to Superman Doomsday animated movie. And it was just fantastic. It was like watching a movie. I've said this time and time again, but for me, this really took the aspects to a whole new level, and it really delivered. And, I was very skeptical about whether or not we would actually see Doomsday on the show and how would Doomsday look. And wow, for me, this was the best looking Doomsday I've seen since the Krypton series. But I really felt that although Doomsday looked more like the comic books, in terms of his appearance, I thought the way Doomsday looked in Superman and Lois, it was kind of like a mutant, not like what they did in Batman v Superman, where he looked more like a mutated turtle. This one was like taking Doomsday and Abomination from the Hulk comics and just meshing them together. And Doomsday looked really scary. And the next 10 minutes we got of this episode towards the end was just some of the best action I have ever seen since this show started. It didn't disappoint, and it was very dark. It was really, really dark. And I loved what they did with Doomsday. They kept him in the shadows, so you didn't see too much of him. But when you did, he was really scary. And I got absolute chills when Doomsday just kept pounding away at Superman's face and he started bleeding. Holy cow. Anybody who's not read the Death of Superman graphic novel or hasn't seen the Superman Doomsday animated movie, check them both out. The season 3 finale. Wow. What an excellent way to end a season. That's how you do it. Leave just enough for everyone, but leave the people wanting to see more. That's how you do it. Fantastic job. First half of this episode, it was very good. Too much focus on, Lana and Sarah and the others, but when it got to the focus on Lois and Clark and Lex Luthor, and eventually with Bizarro mutating into Doomsday and fighting Superman, it was fantastic. It was so good. This is exactly what I've been wanting to see with Superman for a very long time, and it delivered. What an amazing way to cap off season 3, and I can't wait for season 4. I did hear stories about possibly, budget's going to be reduced, but hopefully it won't be too much reduced because you cannot have a reduced fight scene with Superman and Doomsday. You got to throw everything at it, including the kitchen sink. But time will tell, really. But wow, what an unbelievable way to end what has been a fantastic season. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on the season 3 finale, episode 13? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on Lex Luthor transforming Bizarro into Doomsday? Do you thought that was good? What was your thoughts on all of the characters' story arcs being wrapped up the way they did? Do you think they did a good job with that? Do you think some of it may have felt a little bit rushed? And also, how do you think they're going to follow this up? Did you like the way this episode ended with Superman and Doomsday fighting each other on the moon and running towards each other? Do you think that was a good way to end season 3? And is it possible that Superman could die on the moon during his battle against Doomsday? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I want to take this opportunity to say a special thank you to everyone. Hope you've enjoyed listening to me talking about all 13 episodes from season 3. And I will see all of you for season 4, which I am very much looking forward to seeing, especially with the way season 3 just ended. I am super pumped, and we all know it's going to be epic. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.